Mike Myers had this period of about 5 years where he was the biggest actor in the world, but now nobody really hears from him anymore, and this is how he destroyed his career. And Mike Myers' career started with pretty humble beginnings, where he actually began on TV in Canada doing sketch comedy, where he was on one show called Bizarre in 1980, and then in 1987 he did a show called It's Only Rock and Roll, which were both sketch comedies, and he did various roles. And because he was popular in Canadian sketch comedy, when he was 26 years old, he was hired for Saturday Night Live, joining in 1989. SNL is kind of this weird thing where some people like Eddie Murphy go on to the big leagues, but many SNL stars kind of fizzle out and go nowhere. But in the case of Mike Myers, he had a huge hit in 1989 because they gave him the popular sketch Wayne's World. And because of the popularity of the sketch, Mike Myers had this idea to turn Wayne's World into its own movie, which SNL was pretty hesitant on approving because they didn't have that much luck in movies before. That was because at the time SNL had only one other sketch become a movie, and that was Blues Brothers in 1980, which was a success, making $115 million on a budget of $27 million. But even though Blues Brothers was a hit, SNL just didn't believe their actors had enough star power to sell movie tickets, but still Paramount managed to approve Mike Myers for his own Wayne's World movie in 1991. But luckily for Mike Myers, Paramount was right to make that decision because Wayne's World was a huge hit, making $183 million on a budget of $20 million, being one of the most profitable movies in 1992. But even though 1992 was the year of Mike Myers, 1993 wasn't, and it was all due to Mike Myers' ego. And that's because when making Wayne's World, Mike Myers had a huge issue with Penelope Sears, who was the movie's director, who said Mike Myers was impossible to work with. Penelope explained in an interview that Mike Myers was extremely difficult to work with because he'd whine on set about having to do scenes over and over again, would complain all the time about his neck hurting, and just said the scenes weren't funny, questioning the writers. There was also an incident where Mike Myers went crazy on set because there was no margarine in his bagel, and because of that he walked off set and refused to return until they got him some. Which, for anyone who doesn't know, margarine is a vegetable oil-based butter alternative, which Mike Myers at the time wasn't eating much butter, thinking it was too fatty, and because of that he complained if they didn't have it on set for him. But because of all of this, when Wayne's World 2 was being made, Mike Myers got Paramount not to rehire Penelope to be director. Which was actually a really big shame because Penelope was a very talented comedy director in the 90s, where she directed The Little Rascals and also The Beverly Hillbillies. And instead, for Wayne's World 2, she got replaced by Steven Surjik, who had almost no experience directing anything at that time. So because that, Wayne's World 2 just didn't get the same reviews the first one did, and only made $72 million on a budget of $30 million, which means it wasn't actually that profitable with marketing and ticket splits, and Wayne's World 3 didn't happen. And that same year, Mike Myers had a bigger flop with the movie I Married an Axe Murderer, which only made $27 million on a budget of $20 million, and Mike Myers was also the writer for, where he demanded to take over production, saying he didn't think the movie was good. And again, he was described to be difficult to work with for that movie, so he ended up going 4 years without booking a single other movie role. But what was looking like Mike Myers was down, he made a comeback in 1997 when he ended up writing the screenplay for a little movie called Austin Powers. Where Mike Myers actually had the idea for years to do a James Bond parody movie, but he couldn't get the funding for it because Spaceballs failed in 1987, only making $40 million on a budget of $25 million. He finally got the funding for it in 1997, where he made the movie, and it was considered a modest hit, making $68 million on a budget of $18 million. What really blew up Austin Powers was the success it had on TV syndication, blockbuster rentals, and also VHS sales, where it did over $60 million in revenue in 1998, a year after the movie came out. Because that thing ended up doing another movie in 1999, which was way more successful, making $312 million on a budget of $33 million. Just to put that in perspective, there was actually a James Bond movie that came out that year called The World Is Not Enough with Pierce Brosnan, which made $367 million on a budget of $135 million, meaning the parody Austin Powers was actually way more profitable. The problem was, even though Austin Powers was everywhere after that movie came out, from t-shirts to commercials with Britney Spears, there was a huge problem for Mike Myers' career, and that was the typecast as Austin Powers. But still, during that time, Mike Myers was still able to land another huge hit with Shrek, which made $493 million on a budget of $60 million in 2001. But then problems started to happen for Mike Myers around 2002, when the third Austin Powers movie wasn't that successful with audiences or critics, where they just didn't like it as much, saying Mike Myers as Austin Powers was too tired of a role. It was still profitable, making $297 million on a budget of $65 million, but it didn't make what the studio projected, which was over $500 million, and many people felt they spent too much money on marketing as well. And then a year later, Mike Myers tried to move away from Austin Powers with Cat in the Hat, but it turned out to be the movie from hell getting bad reviews, and also failed massively, making $134 million on a budget of $109 million, meaning the movie actually lost around $40 million. And making it worse, Mike Myers was once again called a diva on set making Cat in the Hat, where all the people in the crew said he was very rude, where he'd just walk in, not talk to anybody, and he also didn't talk to any of the child actors, forming no relationship with them at all. Which is a recurrent complaint about Mike Myers as a person, where he's described as very similar to Ellen DeGeneres, and he actually has fired people on multiple occasions for making eye contact with him if they're working with him. And then Mike Myers tried for a comeback with the movie The Love Guru, thinking it would be the next Austin Powers, but it turned out to be a huge failure, making only $41 million on a budget of $62 million, and also got awful reviews. And after that, the only thing Mike Myers had going for him was Shrek, but that ended up fizzling out after the fourth Shrek movie, which made $200 million less than Shrek 2, so because of that, they decided to wait and not make a Shrek 5 for a number of years. So basically, because of typecasting, a reputation of being extremely rude to people, and also being attached to a lot of bad projects, Mike Myers' career really has failed. There is still some hope for him this year with Shrek 5, but at the end of the day, nobody's going to look at that as a Mike Myers movie. They're going to think Eddie Murphy, Cameron Diaz, maybe Zendaya, but nobody's going to look at that and say, oh yeah, this is the Mike Myers film. And ultimately, I think this just comes down to the Ellen DeGeneres issue that Mike Myers isn't a super nice guy to work with. It really does show through a pattern of history on other movies he's done, and also when he does make movies, they're not always very good. But with that, I'm Charles Prowl. Please subscribe to learn something.